This book was generated using Speakter's AI voices. You can create human-like voiceovers in over 50 languages.
The morning air was crisp and filled with the promise of adventure. Pathfinder surveyed his companions, each one a unique piece in the puzzle of their journey. Mabel Dunham, a young woman with bright eyes and a determined set to her jaw, couldn't contain her excitement. Her fingers danced along the straps of her pack, betraying her eagerness to reunite with her father. Beside her, her Uncle Charles Cap cut a comical figure, his sailor's gait more suited to rolling decks than the uneven forest floor. His eyes darted nervously from tree to tree, as if expecting a pirate ship to emerge from behind the thick trunks. Completing the party was Jasper Western, a young mariner whose confident stance spoke volumes of his familiarity with the Great Lakes. As they set off, the forest seemed to come alive around them. The canopy above filtered the sunlight, creating a dappled pattern on the forest floor that shifted with each breeze. Pathfinder moved with a grace that belied his years, each step purposeful and silent. The soft crunch of leaves beneath his feet was barely audible, a stark contrast to the clumsy shuffling of his companions. "Look here!" Pathfinder's gravelly voice cut through the forest whispers. He crouched, his weathered hand hovering over a bent blade of grass. "A deer passed by not long ago. See how the dew is disturbed on these leaves?" Mabel leaned in, her curiosity piqued. The scent of damp earth and crushed vegetation filled her nostrils. "How can you tell it wasn't long ago?" Pathfinder's eyes crinkled with a smile, the lines around them telling stories of countless days spent in the wilderness. "The moisture hasn't had time to settle back, lass. It's a fresh trail." Their path soon led them to a rushing stream, its waters frothing white over moss-covered rocks. The sound of water crashing against stone filled the air, drowning out the forest's softer melodies. Cap eyed the crossing with trepidation, his sea legs suddenly feeling very inadequate on the slippery banks. "I don't suppose there's a bridge hidden somewhere?" he grumbled, eliciting a chuckle from Jasper. "No bridges here, Mr. Cap," Jasper said, already rolling up his trousers. "But I'll help you across." As they navigated the treacherous current, Mabel couldn't help but notice the easy way Pathfinder bounded from stone to stone. It was as if the river itself bent to his will, the water parting around his feet like a loyal subject before its king. She felt a flutter of admiration in her chest, quickly followed by a pang of guilt as she caught Jasper's eye. The young mariner's gaze held a warmth that made her cheeks flush, and she quickly looked away. The day wore on, and the forest grew denser. Shafts of sunlight pierced the canopy like golden spears, illuminating a world teeming with life. The air grew thick with the scent of pine and wildflowers, punctuated by the occasional musty odor of decaying leaves. Pathfinder's voice became a soothing backdrop as he pointed out various plants and their uses. "This here," he said, plucking a leaf from a low-hanging branch, "can ease the pain of bee stings, and that root there? It'll settle a troubled stomach quicker than you can say Jack Robinson." Cap, still struggling with the uneven terrain, found himself grudgingly impressed. Sweat beaded on his brow, and he wiped it away with a grimy hand. "I suppose there's more to this blasted forest than meets the eye," he admitted, his voice a mix of exhaustion and newfound respect. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Pathfinder led them to a small clearing. The fading light cast long shadows across the ground, turning familiar shapes into mysterious silhouettes. "We'll make camp here," he announced, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. With practiced efficiency, he showed them how to construct simple shelters from branches and leaves. The smell of fresh-cut wood filled the air as they worked. "Keep 'em low," he instructed, "less likely to be spotted that way." Jasper took charge of starting the fire, his hands moving with the surety of one accustomed to wilderness living. As the flames flickered to life, casting a warm glow over their makeshift camp, Mabel noticed a flash of something in Pathfinder's eyes as he watched the young mariner. Respect, perhaps, tinged with a hint of wariness. The night settled around them like a heavy blanket, bringing with it a chorus of unfamiliar sounds. Owls hooted in the distance, their calls echoing through the trees like mournful ghosts. Unseen creatures rustled in the underbrush, their movements sending shivers down Cap's spine. He jumped at every noise, his hand never far from his pistol. Easy there, sailor, Pathfinder said, his voice low and reassuring. The forest has its own music, but it means us no harm. Leastways, not tonight. As they huddled around the fire, sharing a simple meal of dried meat and hard tack, Mabel found herself drawn into conversation with Pathfinder. His knowledge of the land and its ways seemed boundless, and she drank in every word. The firelight danced across his weathered features, highlighting the wisdom etched into every line. "How did you learn all this?" she asked, her eyes wide with wonder. Pathfinder's gaze grew distant, as if looking back through the years. "The forest itself was my teacher, lass. Every tree, every stream, every track in the mud. They all have stories to tell, if you know how to listen." As the fire burned low and the others settled into their makeshift beds, Pathfinder took up his position for the first watch. He sat with his back against a broad oak tree, its rough bark a comforting presence against his spine. His rifle lay across his knees, a silent promise of protection. The night air carried a chill that seemed to seep into their bones, and Mabel pulled her blanket tighter around her shoulders. Just as sleep began to claim them, a bone-chilling howl pierced the night. Pathfinder's body tensed, his hand tightening on his rifle. The howl came again, closer this time, followed by another from a different direction. As the group huddled together, fear etched on their faces. Pathfinder's voice cut through the darkness. "Wolves! And they're hunting!" The forest, once a place of wonder, now seemed alive with unseen threats. As the howls grew closer, Pathfinder knew that their journey to Fort Oswego was about to become far more perilous than any of them had imagined. The group's arduous journey through the wilderness had finally come to an end. After several days of challenging travel, they arrived at Fort Oswego, a bustling military outpost perched on the shores of Lake Ontario. The fort's imposing walls loomed before them, a formidable silhouette against the fading light of day. The Union Jack fluttered atop the highest tower, its colors a defiant splash against the vast brooding sky. As they drew closer, the air thickened with a cacophony of sounds, the rhythmic clang of metal on metal, the sharp bark of orders, and the relentless lapping of waves against the shore. Mabel's heart raced, a mix of excitement and apprehension coursing through her veins. The wilderness had been unpredictable, but this new world of stone and discipline presented its own set of challenges. She inhaled deeply, the scent of gunpowder and pine mingling in her nostrils. A stark reminder of the frontier's dual nature, both wild and tamed. At the gates, a figure stood tall and straight, his weathered face breaking into a smile as he caught sight of the approaching party. It was Sergeant Dunham, Mabel's father. The years had etched deep lines into his face, each one a testament to the hardships of military life. As Mabel's eyes fell upon him, a whirlwind of emotions threatened to overwhelm her. "Father!" The word escaped her lips as a half-sob, half-cry of joy. She rushed forward, her legs carrying her faster than thought. Their embrace was fierce and tender, years of separation melting away in an instant. The rough fabric of his uniform against her cheek, the familiar scent of tobacco and leather. It was all achingly familiar, and yet somehow new. Sergeant Dunham's voice was gruff with emotion as he welcomed the entire party. "Pathfinder," he said, clasping the scout's hand with a grip that spoke volumes of respect and gratitude. "I can't thank you enough for bringing my daughter safely to me." As the initial flurry of greetings subsided, Sergeant Dunham drew Pathfinder aside. Their hushed conversation carried on the breeze, fragments reaching Mabel's ears. She watched as Pathfinder's usually stoic face flickered with surprise. Something in her father's words had unsettled the seasoned scout. "I'm flattered, Sergeant," Pathfinder said, his voice low and uncertain. "But marriage, it's as foreign to me as the sea." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Mabel felt a strange twist in her gut, a mixture of curiosity and something else she couldn't quite name. Eager to distract herself, Mabel began to explore her new surroundings. The fort was a hive of activity, soldiers marching in formation, their boots striking the ground in perfect unison. Supplies were being unloaded, crates and barrels forming a maze-like obstacle course. On the walls, sentries stood vigilant, their eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of threat. A group of Mohican scouts caught Mabel's attention. Their movements were fluid and silent, a stark contrast to the regimented bustle around them. As they prepared for a patrol, Mabel found herself drawn to their quiet efficiency, fascinated by the blend of their ancient customs with the demands of frontier warfare. Cap, Mabel's uncle, stood out like a ship's mast in a forest. His sea legs wobbled on solid ground, each step a negotiation with the earth beneath him. "Blimey," he muttered, eyeing the trees warily. "I'd rather face a squall than this green ocean." His discomfort was palpable, a fish out of water in this world of earth and stone. Jasper, on the other hand, moved through the fort with the ease of familiarity. He greeted old friends with hearty handshakes and playful jabs, his eyes often straying to Mabel. There was a warmth in his gaze that sent a flutter through her chest. "Would you like a tour?" he offered, a shy smile playing on his lips. "There's more to this fort than meets the eye." As Jasper led Mabel along the ramparts, the setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and pink. He pointed out the strategic importance of the fort's location, his arm sweeping across the glittering expanse of Ontario. "From here we control the lake," he explained, his voice filled with pride. "It's the key to the entire region." The day wore on, the bustle of the fort gradually quieting as night fell. Mabel lay in her narrow bunk, her mind whirling with the day's events. The reunion with her father, the strange new world of the fort, and the undercurrents of emotion she sensed in those around her, all combined to fill her with a sense of anticipation. As sleep began to claim her, Mabel's last thoughts were of the vast, unknown future stretching before her, as wide and mysterious as the Great Lake beyond the fort's walls. Little did she know that in the coming days the rhythms of military life would become as familiar as her own heartbeat, and that this frontier outpost would soon become the stage for events that would test her courage, her loyalty, and her heart in ways she could never have imagined. In the darkness of her quarters, a sudden muffled sound jolted Mabel from the edge of sleep. Footsteps, too light and careful to be a soldier's, crept past her door. A whispered conversation, tense and urgent, drifted through the night air. Something was amiss in Fort Oswego, and as Mabel's pulse quickened, she realized that their arrival might have set in motion events far beyond her understanding. The group had arrived at Fort Oswego several days ago. They had quickly settled into the rhythms of military life, adapting to the routines and rigors of the frontier outpost. The crisp morning air nipped at their faces as they made their way to Sergeant Dunham's quarters. The fort bustled with activity, the clang of metal and shouts of soldiers creating a backdrop of controlled chaos. As they entered the room, the atmosphere shifted, becoming heavy with unspoken tension. Sergeant Dunham's weathered face was etched with concern, his usually twinkling eyes now steely with resolve. "Gather round," he said, his voice low and gravelly. The group huddled closer, the scent of leather and gunpowder mingling in the close quarters. Dunham unrolled a map on the rough-hewn table, the parchment crackling like dry leaves. His calloused finger traced a path across Lake Ontario, coming to rest on a tiny speck. "Station Island," he announced, the name hanging in the air like a challenge. The room fell silent, save for the distant cry of a hawk outside. Dunham's words painted a grim picture. Their comrades on the island were in dire straits, desperately needing supplies and reinforcement. The French and their native allies lurked like shadows on the water, their very presence a constant threat. As Dunham outlined the perils they faced, the room seemed to shrink. The dangers pressed in from all sides, as tangible as the walls around them. Yet as the briefing progressed, determination began to outshine fear in the eyes of those gathered. With the meeting concluded, the fort erupted into a flurry of activity. Pathfinder retreated to his quarters, maps spread before him like a patchwork quilt of wilderness. His fingers, rough as tree bark, traced possible routes, each touch a calculation of risk and reward. In the bustling kitchen, Mabel found herself surrounded by the sharp scent of herbs and the metallic tang of medical supplies. Her heart raced as she learned to pack wounds and preserve food, each task a step into the unknown. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders, heavy but not unbearable. Down at the docks, the lap of water against wood formed a soothing rhythm as Jasper pored over charts of Lake Ontario. The young sailor's keen eyes searched for hidden passages and sheltered coves, each discovery a potential lifeline. Even Cap, initially skeptical of inland sailing, found himself drawn into the preparations. His booming voice carried across the water as he discussed wind patterns and stealth tactics with Jasper, years of seafaring experience finding new purpose on the lake. As twilight painted the sky in hues of lavender and gold, the group gathered one last time. Dunham's words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their mission. "Remember," he said, his voice steady as a rock in a storm, "secrecy is our shield, courage our sword. May Providence guide us all." They filed out into the cool night air, the enormity of their task looming before them like the vast dark waters of Lake Ontario. Yet in the shared glances and quiet nods exchanged, there was a spark of hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. As they prepared to turn in for the night, a commotion erupted at the fort's gate. Shouts pierced the darkness, followed by the thunderous report of a musket. The group exchanged alarmed glances. Had their mission been compromised before it even began? The group bid farewell to the relative safety of Fort Oswego, their hearts heavy with a mix of excitement and fear. They embarked on their perilous journey across Lake Ontario, leaving behind the familiar for the unknown. As they boarded the small, swift boat chosen for its agility, the enormity of their task settled upon them like a heavy cloak. Jasper took his place at the helm, his keen eyes scanning the horizon where water met sky in a shimmering embrace. The fort slowly shrank behind them, a last bastion of security fading into memory. The vastness of Lake Ontario stretched before them, a living entity that breathed with each swell and sigh of the waves. Choppy waters slapped against the hull, a constant rhythm that spoke of the lake's restless nature. Unpredictable gusts of wind tugged at their sails, whispering of dangers yet unseen. As they sailed further from shore, the true challenges of their journey revealed themselves. Jasper's skill was put to the ultimate test as he guided their vessel through a treacherous maze of hidden perils. His hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white with concentration, as he anticipated each twist and turn of their watery path. Like a master chess player, he maneuvered around shallow reefs and jagged rocks that lurked just beneath the surface, ready to tear their hull to splinters. Days melted into one another, the monotony of endless water broken only by the constant vigilance required to stay alive. Then, without warning, a small canoe appeared on the horizon. As it drew nearer, the figures of Tuscarora Chief Arrowhead and his wife June came into focus. The air crackled with tension, thick enough to cut with a knife. Pathfinder and Jasper exchanged wary glances, their bodies coiled tight as springs. The ongoing conflict between the British and French cast long shadows over even this chance encounter, and Arrowhead's loyalties were as murky as the lake's depths. June, quiet and watchful, seemed to communicate volumes to Mabel with just a look. In that moment, a bridge of understanding formed between the two women, transcending the barriers of culture and circumstance. As they continued their journey, the lake's beauty took on a sinister edge. Smoke signals rose from distant shores like ghostly fingers, their patterns a coded language that spoke of unseen eyes watching their every move. Strange canoes appeared and vanished in the mist like phantoms, leaving the group to question their own senses. Cap's weathered face creased with concentration as he put his seafaring experience to use. His keen eyes picked out patterns in the movement of distant vessels, recognizing the telltale signs of organized patrols. "They're out there," he muttered, his voice low and gravelly, circling like sharks smelling blood in the water. Pathfinder's connection to the wilderness allowed him to read the subtle language of nature. He noticed how the birdsong changed, becoming muted and wary, and how the animals on the shoreline moved with heightened caution. "The forest knows we're not alone," he said softly, his words carrying a weight that settled heavily on the group like a fog. The need for stealth became paramount. They took to hiding in secluded coves during the harsh light of day, emerging only when darkness draped its protective cloak over the lake. Clever tactics were employed to throw off any pursuers, doubling back on their route, leaving false trails and using the wind and waves to mask their passage. Mabel, who had initially viewed their journey with a sense of excitement, felt the weight of their predicament settle upon her shoulders. The constant vigilance, the hushed voices, and the tense set of her companion's shoulders drove home the gravity of their situation. This was no adventure from the pages of a book, but a deadly game where a single misstep could spell disaster. As the days wore on, the earlier hints of rivalry between Jasper and Pathfinder melted away like morning mist. In the face of shared danger, they worked in perfect harmony, their skills complementing each other like two halves of a whole. Jasper's mastery of the water and Pathfinder's intimate knowledge of the land combined to guide the group through increasingly treacherous territory. The closer they drew to their destination, the more the tension ratcheted up. Every splash could be an enemy paddle, every shadow on the shore a hidden foe. The distant crack of gunfire echoed across the water, each report a stark reminder of the conflict that raged around them. War canoes were glimpsed on the horizon, their silhouettes etched against the setting sun like harbingers of doom. As night fell and the sound of gunfire grew nearer, the group huddled in their boat, every sense straining for signs of danger. The mission that had seemed so straightforward back at Fort Oswego now loomed before them, fraught with peril. In the darkness, with danger pressing in from all sides, they knew that their true test was only just beginning. The moon cast a silvery path across the water, guiding them towards what they hoped was safety. But as they approached a narrow passage between two islands, an eerie calm settled over the lake. The wind died down, leaving their sails limp and useless. An oppressive silence fell, broken only by the gentle lapping of water against the hull and the pounding of their own hearts. Something wasn't right. They could feel it in their bones, in the very air around them. Little did they know, they were sailing straight into a deadly trap. The group approached a narrow passage between two islands, their hearts pounding with anticipation. Little did they know they were sailing straight into a deadly trap. The air was thick with tension, the only sound the gentle lapping of water against their boat. Suddenly, the tranquil scene erupted into chaos. Iroquois war canoes burst from hidden coves, their occupants unleashing a hail of arrows that whistled through the air like angry hornets. The forested shores, once a picturesque backdrop, now bristled with danger as more arrows rained down from concealed warriors. Pathfinder's weathered hands moved with practiced efficiency, his rifle cracking like thunder in the confined space. The acrid smell of gunpowder filled the air, mixing with the earthy scent of the surrounding forest. Beside him, the soldiers returned fire, their faces set in grim determination, jaws clenched tight against the fear threatening to overwhelm them. Jasper, his brow furrowed in concentration, guided their vessel with the skill of a seasoned sailor. His muscles strained as he maneuvered the boat, narrowly avoiding the grasping hands of warriors attempting to board. The wood of the boat creaked under the stress, a constant reminder of their precarious situation. Amidst the mayhem, June, Arrowhead's wife, played a dangerous game of divided loyalties. Her eyes, dark and conflicted, darted between the battling groups. The weight of her decision pressed down on her like a physical force. In a moment of choice, she caught Mabel's attention with a subtle gesture, warning of an impending attack from behind. Mabel's heart leaped into her throat, the taste of fear bitter on her tongue. She relayed the information to Pathfinder, her voice barely audible over the din of battle. Pathfinder swiftly repositioned their defenses, his movements fluid and decisive, narrowly avoiding a devastating blow. The air crackled with tension as June continued her covert assistance. She whispered misleading directions to some Iroquois warriors, her voice steady despite the trembling of her hands. Her actions sowed seeds of confusion that blossomed into precious moments of reprieve for the beleaguered group. Pathfinder, his keen eyes missing nothing, acknowledged her aid with a slight nod. A silent pact formed in the heat of battle. As the fighting intensified, unexpected heroes emerged from the chaos. Cap, usually more at home on the deck of a ship, surprised everyone with his marksmanship. His shots found their marks with uncanny accuracy, each successful hit punctuated by a grunt of satisfaction. Mabel, her initial fear giving way to steely resolve, moved among the defenders like a guardian angel. Her gentle hands reloaded weapons intended to wounds, her touch bringing comfort amidst the carnage. Arrowhead stood apart, a statue of neutrality caught between two worlds. His stoic face betrayed no emotion as he watched his wife's subtle rebellion, neither aiding nor impeding the group's desperate bid for survival. The internal struggle played out behind his impassive eyes, a war as fierce as the one raging around them. In a heart-stopping moment, Jasper steered their boat towards a treacherous passage. The gauntlet of rocks and swirling currents promised certain death to the unwary. The larger Iroquois canoes fell back, unable to navigate the perilous route. The roar of the water filled their ears, drowning out the shouts of their pursuers. Pathfinder stood at the rear, his rifle a constant threat that kept their enemies at bay. His eyes never left the shoreline, scanning for any sign of pursuit as they slipped into the relative safety of the narrow channel. The tension in his shoulders eased slightly as the sounds of battle faded behind them. As they emerged from the treacherous passage, the full weight of their narrow escape settled over the group. They exchanged glances of relief tinged with newfound respect, the shared danger having forged bonds stronger than steel. Mabel in particular felt a profound connection to June, understanding the enormous risk the woman had taken to ensure their survival. The group pushed on, their senses heightened and their resolve strengthened by the ordeal. As night fell, they sought refuge on a small, hidden island, a temporary haven in the vast wilderness. The island's dense foliage provided cover, its earthy scent a comforting reminder of solid ground beneath their feet. Pathfinder and Jasper took turns standing watch, their vigilant eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of danger. The night air was cool against their skin, a stark contrast to the heat of battle they had endured earlier. Under the canopy of stars, the weary travelers found moments of quiet reflection. The day's events had changed them, opening their eyes to the harsh realities of their mission and the unexpected alliances that could mean the difference between life and death. As they drifted off to sleep, lulled by the gentle lapping of waves against the shore, each member of the group carried with them a newfound appreciation for their companions and a deeper understanding of the challenges that lay ahead in this untamed land. Just as exhaustion began to claim them, a distant sound pierced the night. The unmistakable rhythm of paddles cutting through water echoed across the lake. Pathfinder's eyes snapped open, his body tensing as he realized their ordeal was far from over. The Iroquois had found their trail, and dawn would bring a new battle for survival. The group finally arrived at Station Island, their hearts still racing from the harrowing escape. The Iroquois ambush had left them shaken, but alive. As they approached the remote outpost, the strategic importance of the island became immediately apparent. Lake Ontario stretched out before them, a vast, shimmering tapestry of blue and silver, dotted with distant sails that could be friend or foe. The air was thick with the scent of pine and lake water, a crisp breeze carrying the promise of autumn. Waves lapped gently against the rocky shore, a soothing counterpoint to the group's still racing pulses. As they drew nearer, the small garrison on the island stirred to life, like a hive of bees alerted to intruders. Weathered faces emerged from behind wooden palisades, eyes squinting against the glare of the sun. Hands shielded brows as the soldiers watched the newcomers approach. A mixture of relief and wariness etched on their features. Among them stood Lieutenant Muir, his presence a beacon of authority in the wilderness. "Welcome to our humble abode," Muir called out, his rich Scottish brogue carrying across the water. The words seemed to break a spell, and suddenly the air was filled with the bustle of activity. As the group disembarked, their legs still unsteady from the long journey, Mabel found herself drawn to the lieutenant's sophisticated demeanor. His eyes twinkled with wit as he bowed slightly, taking her hand. And who might this vision of loveliness be? Mabel felt a blush creep up her cheeks, the heat rising in stark contrast to the cool breeze. She was unused to such gallantry in the wilderness, where survival often took precedence over social niceties. "Mabel Dunham, sir," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. As the day progressed, the group fell into the rhythm of their mission. Pathfinder and Jasper, their movements as fluid and natural as the forest creatures they often tracked, prowled the island's perimeter. Their keen eyes, honed by years in the wilderness, spotted weaknesses in the fortifications that others might have missed. "See there," Pathfinder said, his calloused hand gesturing to a rocky outcrop. "A watchtower there would give us eyes over the whole eastern approach." His voice was low but carried the weight of experience. Cap joined them, his sailor's gait still evident even on land. His weathered face creased in concentration as he gazed out over the lake, the water reflecting in his eyes like a second home. Aye, and we'll need to keep a sharp eye on those distant sails. The French are getting bolder by the day. Meanwhile, Mabel found herself at the heart of the garrison's activities. She moved among the soldiers, her presence like a breath of fresh air in their isolated world. As she organized supplies and tended to their needs, she couldn't help but notice the grateful looks and shy smiles that followed her. It was a stark reminder of how long these men had been away from home, from the gentler touches of civilization. As the sun began to dip towards the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, the full scope of their mission crystallized. It wasn't just about resupplying the garrison. They were the eyes and ears of the British in this vast, untamed frontier. The weight of responsibility settled on their shoulders like a physical thing. Gathered around a crackling fire that evening, the group shared a meal and stories. The flames cast dancing shadows on their faces, highlighting the mix of determination and apprehension in their eyes. Soldiers spoke in hushed tones of increased French naval activity and whispers of large Native American gatherings on the mainland. Each word seemed to add another layer of tension to the air. Throughout it all, Arrowhead and June kept to themselves, their presence a silent reminder of the complex web of alliances that stretched across the land. June's dark eyes often found Mabel's, holding secrets that seemed to simmer just beneath the surface. Mabel felt a shiver run down her spine, unsure if it was from the cooling night air or the intensity of that gaze. As the night deepened, Pathfinder slipped away from the group. His moccasined feet made no sound as he scouted the island's perimeter, every sense alert for danger. The lapping of waves against the shore and the distant cry of a loon were the only sounds that broke the stillness. Yet even in this seeming peace, his hand never strayed far from his weapon. Near the fire, Jasper and Mabel found a moment of quiet companionship. Their shoulders brushed as they sat side by side, their laughter soft and intimate. The warmth between them was palpable, a stark contrast to the chill of the night air. Unbeknownst to them, Lieutenant Muir watched from the shadows, his expression unreadable in the flickering light. His eyes narrowed slightly, a calculating look passing over his features. As they retired for the night, each member of the group carried with them the weight of their experiences and the uncertainty of what lay ahead. The island, once a dot on a map, had become their world, a fortress of hope in a sea of danger. As they drifted off to sleep, the gentle lapping of waves against the shore served as a constant reminder of their isolation and the vast, untamed wilderness that surrounded them. But as the embers of the fire died down and the moon rose high in the sky, a sense of unease began to settle over the island. The night seemed to grow darker, the shadows deeper. In the distance, barely audible over the sound of the waves, came a noise that didn't belong, the soft splash of a paddle cutting through water. Pathfinder's eyes snapped open, his hand already reaching for his rifle. Something was coming. Days passed on Station Island, each one bringing a growing sense of unease. The atmosphere became thick with tension, as if the very air was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. The once peaceful island transformed into a cauldron of whispered fears and sidelong glances. Soldiers huddled in small groups, their voices low and urgent as they spoke of strange occurrences that defied explanation. At night, eerie lights danced across the lake's surface, their ghostly glow reflecting off the water like spectral fingers reaching for the shore. Come morning, peculiar markings appeared in the sand near the water's edge, symbols that vanished with the tide, leaving behind only questions and a gnawing sense of dread. Lieutenant Muir's face was a map of worry lines as he called Sergeant Dunham and Cap into a private meeting. The small room felt like a tomb, the air heavy and stifling as Muir leaned in close, his voice barely above a whisper. "Gentlemen," he said, the words seeming to stick in his throat, "I fear we have a traitor in our midst." The accusation fell like a stone into still water, ripples of shock spreading through the small group. Suspicion, that poisonous seed, found fertile ground in their minds. Soon all eyes turned to Jasper Western. His extensive knowledge of the lake, once considered a valuable asset, now cast a long shadow over him. His friendly relations with some Native American tribes, previously seen as a diplomatic skill, suddenly took on a sinister hue. Muir presented his case with the precision of a surgeon wielding a scalpel. Each piece of evidence another cut into Jasper's reputation. He spoke of unexplained absences, of an uncanny ability to navigate through enemy territory unscathed. With each word, the noose of suspicion tightened around Jasper's neck. Cap, still struggling to find his footing in this alien frontier world, found himself swayed by Muir's arguments. His sailor's superstitions, born from long nights at sea where every creak could herald disaster, made him susceptible to fears of betrayal. He nodded along, his weathered face a mask of grim agreement. Sergeant Dunham stood torn, a man caught between the rock of duty and the hard place of instinct. His eyes, usually sharp and decisive, now darted between Muir and the door, as if seeking an escape from this impossible situation. With a heavy sigh that seemed to come from the depths of his very soul, he gave the order. Jasper was to be confined to quarters, pending an investigation. The decision fell like an axe, cleaving their tight-knit group in two. Pathfinder, loyal to a fault, rose to his friend's defense with the ferocity of a bear protecting its cub. His voice, usually as calm as a forest stream, now thundered with indignation as he recounted years of shared adventures and unwavering loyalty. Mabel found herself adrift in a sea of conflicting emotions, her heart and mind at war. Her growing feelings for Jasper clashed violently with the seeds of doubt planted by the accusations. She visited him in his confinement, her heart pounding like a war drum in her chest. But instead of finding reassurance in his eyes, she left with more questions swirling in her mind like leaves caught in an autumn tempest. As days crawled by with agonizing slowness, the island transformed. Once a symbol of British strength, it now felt like a powder keg, ready to explode at the slightest spark. Every rustle in the bushes, every unexpected sound, became potential evidence of treachery. Soldiers who had once shared meals and laughter now exchanged mistrustful glances, their hands never far from their weapons. June moved through this charged atmosphere like a silent ghost, her dark eyes taking in everything. She seemed to carry secrets as numerous as the stars, sharing them with Mabel in fleeting glances and subtle gestures. Her presence added another layer to the mystery, a reminder that not all allies wore the same uniform. Arrowhead stood apart, his face an unreadable mask. His loyalties remained as obscure as the depths of the lake, adding to the swirling currents of uncertainty that threatened to pull them all under. The mission, once clear and defined, now teetered on the brink of failure. The threat came not from external enemies, but from the poison of suspicion that had seeped into their ranks like a slow-acting venom. The garrison's effectiveness crumbled as soldiers took sides, some standing firm in their belief of Jasper's innocence, while others called for harsher measures. Pathfinder, usually as comfortable in the wilderness as a fish in water, found himself lost in this new emotional landscape. He moved through the camp like a bear with a thorn in its paw, trying to protect his friend while holding together the fraying edges of their group's unity. The island, once a bastion of strength, now felt like a trap closing in on them all. Every unusual sight or sound became fodder for wild theories, each whisper of the wind interpreted as a potential signal to unseen enemies. The very air seemed to crackle with tension, as if the island itself was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable moment when something would have to give. As night fell, bringing with it a suffocating darkness that seemed to press in from all sides, Pathfinder stood at the edge of the camp. His keen eyes scanned the tree line, searching for any sign of movement. Suddenly, a flicker of light caught his attention. Another of those mysterious, dancing flames on the lake. But this time, it was different. This time, it was moving with purpose, growing larger, coming closer. Pathfinder's hand tightened on his rifle as he realized, whatever was coming, it would reach the island before dawn. The true traitor on Station Island was finally unmasked in a shocking turn of events. Lieutenant Muir, who had been the most vocal accuser of Jasper, was exposed as the one who had been secretly communicating with the enemy. The revelation hit the garrison like a thunderbolt on a clear day, shattering the uneasy calm that had settled over the island. The air grew thick with tension, as if a storm was brewing on the horizon. Soldiers shifted uneasily, their hands instinctively tightening on their weapons as they struggled to process this betrayal. June, silent and observant as a shadow, stepped forward. Her dark eyes glinted with purpose as she produced a damning piece of evidence, a hidden message intercepted from Muir's own hand. The parchment crinkled as it was unfolded, the sound unnaturally loud in the stunned silence. Details of the island's defenses and planned movements of British forces danced mockingly before the eyes of the onlookers, written in Muir's distinctive scrawl. A heavy silence fell over the group, broken only by the distant cry of a gull and the soft lapping of waves against the shore. The tang of salt in the air seemed to intensify, mingling with the bitter taste of betrayal that hung heavy on every tongue. Faces that had been etched with suspicion now twisted with shock and disbelief. Muir's composure cracked like thin ice under pressure. His eyes darted wildly, searching for an escape route. In a desperate bid for freedom, he bolted, his boots pounding against the packed earth. But Pathfinder and Jasper, moving with the synchronicity of longtime comrades, quickly cut off his escape. Their hands closed around Muir's arms like iron vices, rendering his struggles as futile as a fish caught in a net. As Muir was brought before the others, his facade crumbled completely. Words poured from him in a torrent of confession, each revelation striking like a physical blow. His motivations unraveled like a tangled skein, greed glittering like fool's gold, and a misguided belief in the French cause that had taken root like a poisonous weed in his mind. The impact of Muir's words rippled through the garrison. Soldiers who had trusted him felt the sting of betrayal, their faith shattered like a mirror thrown to the ground. The very foundations of their unity seemed to tremble, threatening to crumble beneath their feet. Arrowhead, upon learning of Muir's treachery, transformed into a force of nature unleashed. His eyes blazed with a fury that seemed to scorch the very air around him. In a moment of chaos that erupted like a sudden squall, he broke free from his guards. With the deadly precision of a striking snake, he hurled his tomahawk. The weapon found its mark with a sickening thud, and Muir crumpled to the ground, his life snuffed out as swiftly as a candle in a gale. "Justice," Arrowhead declared, his voice as cold and final as the blade that had ended Muir's life. "For the lives lost in the recent attack." The violent act sent shockwaves through the already turbulent atmosphere. It was as if a match had been thrown into a powder keg, further complicating the tense situation on the island. The air crackled with unspoken fear and uncertainty, each person acutely aware of the precarious balance they now walked. Amidst the turmoil, Pathfinder and Jasper shared a moment of silent understanding. Their eyes met across the chaos, a bridge of trust rebuilt stronger than ever. The trials they had faced together had forged a bond as unbreakable as tempered steel, a beacon of hope in the storm of betrayal that swirled around them. Mabel stood frozen, her face pale as moonlight, horror etched in every line of her features. The brutality of Arrowhead's action and the depth of Muir's betrayal left her feeling adrift in a sea of uncertainty. Yet like a lighthouse piercing through fog, Jasper's proven innocence shone through. She found herself drawn to his steadfast character, a stark contrast to Muir's duplicity. In that moment, the depth of her feelings for Jasper crystallized, clear and true as a mountain stream. As the dust began to settle, the group was left to grapple with the harsh realities of life on the frontier. They had been reminded in the most brutal way possible that allegiances could shift as swiftly and unpredictably as the wind through the trees. The enemy they had feared had been among them all along, wearing a familiar face and speaking with a trusted voice. Now, in the wake of this earth-shattering revelation, they faced the daunting task of rebuilding trust and unity. The soldiers of the garrison, their faith shaken to its core, turned their eyes to Pathfinder and Jasper. In these two men, steady as the North Star, they saw the leadership they desperately needed to navigate the uncertain times ahead. As night fell over Station Island, bringing with it a blanket of uneasy calm, Mabel found herself unable to sleep. Her mind raced with the day's events, her heart torn between relief at Jasper's vindication and the weight of all that had transpired. She stepped out into the cool night air, seeking solace in the gentle whisper of the breeze. But as she gazed out over the dark waters surrounding the island, a new realization dawned on her. The dust from recent events had barely settled, and yet she found herself at a crossroads. Her true feelings for Jasper burned bright in her heart, but the ghost of her father's dying wish loomed large. As the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon, Mabel knew that the coming day would bring with it decisions that would shape not only her future, but the fate of all those on Station Island. The dust from recent events on Station Island had barely settled. Mabel Dunham found herself at a crossroads, confronting her true feelings and grappling with the weight of her father's dying wish. The sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Long shadows stretched across the rugged landscape, mirroring the conflicting emotions that tugged at Mabel's heart. The gentle lapping of waves against the shore seemed to whisper secrets, urging her to face the truth she'd been avoiding. With each step towards Pathfinder, Mabel's heart raced faster. She found him perched on a weathered log, his keen eyes scanning the tree line. The scent of pine and earth filled her lungs as she took a deep breath, steeling herself for the conversation ahead. "Pathfinder," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need to speak with you." The seasoned frontiersman turned to her, his weathered face softening at the sight of her distress. "What troubles you, Mabel?" he asked, his voice as steady as the ancient pines surrounding them. Mabel's words tumbled out like a rushing stream. "I have the utmost respect for you, your bravery, your kindness, your unwavering loyalty. They're all qualities I admire deeply. But," she paused, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest, "I cannot honor my father's wish for our marriage. My heart, it belongs to Jasper." A heavy silence fell between them, broken only by the distant call of a loon. Pathfinder's eyes, usually sharp as a hawk's, seemed to mist over as he absorbed her words. For a moment that stretched like an eternity, Mabel feared she had shattered something irreparable. Then, like the sun breaking through storm clouds, Pathfinder's face cleared. He reached out, gently taking Mabel's hand in his calloused one. "Mabel," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "your happiness is what matters most. If your heart leads you to Jasper, then that is the path you must follow." Tears of relief and gratitude spilled down Mabel's cheeks. Pathfinder's selfless acceptance was like a balm to her troubled soul. In that moment, she saw not just a skilled woodsman, but a man of true nobility and grace. With the weight lifted from her shoulders, Mabel sought out Jasper. She found him by the lakeshore, skipping stones across the calm water. As their eyes met, it was as if the world around them faded away. The setting sun cast a golden glow on Jasper's face, highlighting the hope and love in his eyes. Jasper took Mabel in his arms, his embrace warm and secure. The scent of lake water and pine clung to him, a comforting reminder of their shared adventures. "I've loved you since the moment I first saw you," he whispered, his breath tickling her ear. "I never dared hope." Mabel leaned back, cupping his face in her hands. "Our love has weathered storms and battles," she said, her eyes shining. "Now it's time for us to build our future together." Their friends, witnesses to their trials and triumphs, celebrated the union with heartfelt joy. The air was filled with laughter and the clinking of tin cups as plans were made for a simple wedding. Dreams of a home near the lake, where Jasper could continue his work as a mariner, took shape in their minds. As the group prepared to leave Station Island, Pathfinder announced his decision to return to the wilderness. His eyes, though tinged with sadness, sparkled with the promise of new adventures. The setting sun cast long shadows, making his figure seem larger than life. "Remember," and he said, clasping hand with Jasper and Mabel, "the frontier is vast, but true bonds of friendship and love are vaster still. May your journey together be as steady as the North Star." With those words, Pathfinder shouldered his rifle and turned toward the dense forest. His figure grew smaller as he walked, until he was swallowed by the green expanse, a living embodiment of the untamed spirit of the American frontier. The remaining members of the group gathered their belongings, their hearts full of mixed emotions. Station Island, once a place of danger and suspicion, had become the forge in which their characters were tested and true bonds were formed. The island stood silent behind them, a testament to their shared experiences and the transformative power of love and loyalty in the face of adversity. As they boarded the boat that would take them back to the mainland, Mabel took one last look at the island. The setting sun cast a golden glow on the trees, and for a moment she thought she saw Pathfinder's silhouette among them. She smiled, knowing that while their paths had diverged, the lessons learned and bonds forged on Station Island would remain with them always. The gentle rocking of the boat and the rhythmic splash of oars in water lulled Mabel into a sense of peace. As the island receded into the distance, she felt Jasper's hand slip into hers. Their fingers intertwined, a physical representation of the new life they were embarking on together. The vast expanse of the lake stretched before them, a metaphor for the endless possibilities that lay ahead. As the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Mabel felt a sense of closure and new beginnings. The challenges they had faced on Station Island had shaped them, preparing them for whatever adventures lay ahead. With hearts full of love, hope, and the spirit of the frontier, Mabel, Jasper, and their companions sailed towards their future, leaving behind the echoes of gunfire and whispers of betrayal. The lessons of loyalty, bravery, and true love would guide them as they carved out their place in the ever-expanding American wilderness.
This book was generated using Speakter's AI voices. You can create human-like voiceovers in over 50 languages.